I think Bitcoin's in the middle of like a perfect storm, right? So if you look at where we're at now, we're at 74,700. But the combination of the Clarity Act potentially getting approved and peace between Iran and the USA, and then Michael Saylor buying like an absolute crazy person. I think when you put those factors all together, we could be in the middle of a perfect storm. Now, I think that perfect storm takes us all the way up to 78,000 or 77,500. The big question is what happens after that? And that's what I want to speak about today. I kind of see us going all the way up this flag to 77, 78,000. But then the big question is what happens at 77 or 78,000. And that's what I want to spend time talking about today, because I think there are two scenarios. The good scenario is we break through it, and I want to show you what happens, and I want to show you what happens if we actually reverse. So big day today. Let's get the show on the road, guys. Wakey, wakey, rise and shine. Beautiful green day out there. We haven't had one of these green days for a long time. And to be honest, I kind of saw it happening, which is why yesterday I went into our Discord, into Frontrunners, and I kind of said, look, guys, you know, this month we could get the Clarity Act approved. We could also get the end of the war, and I'll talk about the end of the war. And then I think we go all the way up to 78,000. The question is, what happens after 78,000? And that's what we're gonna spend time talking about today. If you're new to the channel and you haven't been here yet, well, I guess you've joined us at a pretty good time, because if we do break through 78, then I think the bear market's actually invalidated. If you have been here for a long time, then help me get distribution. You know, I've been on vacation. I got back yesterday. And yeah, I mean, when you hit the like button, it really tells the algorithm that here we are and we're back and we're bringing you crypto love and crypto wisdom. So let's talk about at like what's been happening in the last 24 hours and how things have changed in the last 24 hours, and why we're in a position now where we're about to break 75,000 and we're probably heading towards the top of this wedge here, or the top of this bear flag here. The top of this bearish flag here, which would take us back to 78,000. So in the last 24 hours, I guess, you know, the JD Vance went to Islamabad on the weekend, and the negotiations broke down. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, that is part of the game. The game is that you walk away from the negotiating table and you kind of get the other side to think that the negotiations are falling apart. And then you come back to the negotiating table. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? So what you can see here is you can kind of see that the odds of a permanent peace deal, not even a ceasefire, a permanent peace deal by June is at 60%, by May is at 45%, which means the market is kind of forecasting that the talks are going to continue for a while. When we talk about markets, and I'm not only talking about Bitcoin, I'm talking about the S&P 500, I'm talking about the QQQ, the NASDAQ, etc. What you're seeing is that the markets are back to pre-war levels. In fact, not only are they back at pre-war levels, but they're actually close to all-time highs and above the level that they were where the war started. Let's just quickly go and look at the S&P 500. I think the S&P 500 is about 2% away from all-time highs, literally. So if we go here and we just draw a line to here, 1.4% away from all-time highs. I think that the NASDAQ, or the QQQ, which is the ETF of the NASDAQ, I think that is, let's just see where that is. That's also very, very, very close to all-time highs. So that is 1% away from all-time highs. So markets are back at pre-market levels. Momentum is back in the market. And why? Because the Iranians, after the Trump blockade and after the breakdown of negotiations over the weekend, are basically saying, let's go back to the negotiating table. Trump came out and he said, look, we got a call from the right people, and the right people are telling us that they want to negotiate again. Listen to what he said here.
President, are another round of talks planned with Iran? And if so, will you send Vice President JD Vance with?
Well, he's done a good job, but Steve and Jared, they've all done a very good job. And I can tell you that we've been called by the other side. They'd like to make a deal very badly.
It's all part of the negotiation. This is all a part of the negotiation. Also part of the negotiation is Vance giving the Iranians an exit. He went out on TV and he basically said, we know that you couldn't make a decision. You couldn't make a decision without going back to whoever you're going back to in Iran. Now you've gone back. Now you can come back and you can actually make a decision. I'll frame it for you here so you can just see what he said.
Interesting, Brett, about this is that in the process of doing this negotiation, I do think that we acquired some knowledge about how the Iranians are negotiating. And this is ultimately why we left Pakistan, because what we figured out is that they were unable, I think the team that was there was unable to cut a deal, and they had to go back to Tehran, either from the supreme leader or somebody else, and actually get approval to the terms that we had set. So again, whether we have further conversations, whether we ultimately get to a deal, I really think the ball is in the Iranian court, because we put a lot on the table. We actually made very clear what our red lines were. We also made clear, Brett, that we actually
you get what JD Vance is actually doing here. He's kind of discrediting the negotiations team. He's kind of saying, look, if you're going to come back to the table, then you better come back ready to make a deal. Otherwise, we're negotiating with people who can't really make a deal. And you don't want to be the negotiator that can't actually make a deal, right? That's not where you want to be, right? And so Vance is basically saying, look, guys, if you want to come back to the negotiating table, which we can do, and we'll do that on Thursday in Islamabad, that's great. But come back and be in a position to actually make a deal, and don't actually waste our time. Now, some people say that this deal is because of Trump's blockade of the Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if it's about that. I think if you look at what this war is about, the incentive to continue the war for both sides has diminished greatly. For the Americans, they've hit all the big targets, they've destroyed all the nuclear facilities, they've done everything. They basically destroyed everything they need to get destroyed. They've toppled the old regime. And now the incentive to carry on fighting simply isn't there anymore, right? And because there's no more incentive to carry on fighting, they need a peace deal, specifically in the midterm year. So I don't know if it's dust or whatever it is. So they need the deal. The Iranians just need a deal that they can go back with and save face. They just want to go back and say, look, we didn't get completely trampled in the negotiations. We just need a deal where we can actually go and we can save face. So as it stands right now, they are going back on Thursday. I think, as I said yesterday on Twitter, I think the war comes to an end pretty soon. And I kind of think that this is how the end of the war actually looks. I actually did post it on Twitter. Yeah. I said, okay, mark my words, this is how the war ends. Iran abandons all nuclear enrichment. I think the US is completely not negotiable on the abandonment of nuclear enrichment. No tolls on the strait. You cannot allow Iran to have tolls on the strait, because if that happened, that would cause maritime mayhem. Just imagine like every country that has an ocean outside or on their borders, or that borders an ocean. Imagine that they go out there and they basically put a blockade and start charging tolls to any ships that are actually going past. In terms of reparations, I think this one becomes quite interesting, right? I don't see the US paying reparations to Iran. What I do see is I see Trump and his friends and a whole lot of Israelis actually investing to rebuild the Iranian infrastructure. And when they do, I think they're going to make a lot of returns. Then I think there's the USA the USA and Israel will agree not to invade Iran unless anything changes. And when they say anything changes, you launch an attack on us, we suspect you develop nuclear capabilities, then basically we launch an attack, and that's basically what happens. Now, I think that this happens pretty soon. If it doesn't happen pretty soon and we get the stalemate, everybody loses. Iran gets more destruction. Trump gets more destruction in the polls, and we head towards a midterm with oil going up, with inflation going up, etc., etc. And Iran know that it's basically that's Trump's weak point. As I said before, Trump said, "Look, the one thing they're not going to have is they're not going to have a nuclear weapon." And so I think what you're starting to see now in the press is you're starting to see, we're willing to not enrich uranium for 20 years. And, they said, no, 20 years was too much. Let's talk about 5 years. And so the negotiation is, you're not going to have nuclear. We'll kick the can down the road, maybe for 10, 15, 20 years. And then in 10, 15, 20 years, let's talk again. By that time, there'll be new administration, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully we don't get like a Kamala Harris or something like that, because then Iran will be allowed to enrich things. So that's the update on the war front. As I mentioned earlier, there's also an update on the Clarity Act, right? So they're really, really, really pushing hard to get the Clarity Act passed. The chances now on Polymarket are about 60%, 57%. They were 60% when I looked a few minutes ago. And the reason why I think we need to get this over the line now is exactly what Cynthia Loomis says, right? If they don't pass it now, then we're talking about 2030, because the Democrats win the House or the Senate, and then they're not going to pass the Clarity Act, right? And so we've got to get the bill passed. And it looks like this is the last chance to get it actually passed before 2030, right? So Clarity Act has 15 days to pass the Senate floor, or it's a dead vote. And then it's pretty much dead in 2026. There is another draft coming out now with new wording, I think sometime today. And actually, funny enough, we've finally got alignment. Like, you've got Bessent and Brian Armstrong aligned. Now, you'll remember that we were in a position where Bessent and Brian Armstrong weren't aligned. Bessent was basically saying, you know, if you, how did he say it? He said if you should go live in El Salvador if you don't like the current Clarity Act. And so that's where we are now. But that's not the only thing that's happening on the other front, right? The SEC also came out yesterday, and what they did was they gave a broker exemption to DeFi protocols. So basically, it's a big thing. And the reason why it's such a big thing is because they came out and they basically said, if you are a DeFi protocol or you're a front end for a DeFi protocol, you don't need to have a broker-dealer license. Now, that means that effectively front ends like Hyperliquid, front ends like you can kind of see it when you look here, like Lido, for example, right? Lido is probably one of the tokens that's actually running today up 20%. You can see it here on the Banter bubbles. By the way, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but you can actually trade directly from the Banter bubble. So you press the Trade Now button, and then you connect your exchanges, 𝗏𝗏 or Bybit. And what you do then is you can actually trade directly from the Banter bubbles, believe it or not. You can trade directly from the Banter bubble. So go and set it up. It's this new thing called the trade button, and you'll start seeing it popping up in websites and stuff like that, where you can just trade directly from websites and stuff like that. Very, very, very cool piece of tech. Anyway, so going back to it. Right now, where we're at when it comes to Bitcoin, because of the war and because of the Clarity Act and because of the fact that this mofo, Saylor, is buying like an absolute mad person. We think that today he's going to buy $700 billion worth of Bitcoin. And remember, he bought $1 billion yesterday, right? And that is because he uses this stretch, this STRC 11% or 11.5% yielding instrument to raise money. And every time he does that, every time this goes close to 1, then he can sell more of it and he can raise more capital. And you can kind of see it. So every time the STRC goes towards 100, sorry, not 1, goes towards 100, what you can see is that we get actually big buys. We had $1 billion buy yesterday or the day before, and I think today we're talking about another 700 million. And that's why, if you look at the markets now, what you can see is as soon as the US market opens, this is when Saylor actually starts buying, right? So I don't know if you guys follow, if you guys are in front runners and you follow 𝗥𝗏𝗏, but what 𝗥𝗏𝗏 basically tracks when Saylor starts buying. He says, so Saylor should start buying any minute now. That was, you can see here at 302. What we'll do is we'll actually go back to 302 on the, I don't know the 1 minute chart. I've got the 3 minute chart in this thing. Holy moly, look at this. Let's see if we can get this slightly bigger. Okay, so you can see if you look at like when Saylor actually started to buy, it was somewhere around there, right? Or sorry, somewhere around, there we go, over there. If you were just in front runners and you were just following 𝗥𝗏𝗏's channel, then these are the returns that you could have made, because he's basically tracking every single second of just look at this channel, right? He's monitoring the war. He's monitoring Saylor's buys. It's one of the most alpha-full channels here in front runners. So if you are in front runners, go and have a look. And if you're not in front runners, then go and sign up to front runners. Try it out for 30 days. If you're unhappy after 30 days, I'll give you your full money back. But if you are happy, if you make more money than you are, if you make more money than the subscription cost, then I think it's worth it to basically stay in. So if you want to capitalize on that, just go. There's a link below here. Johnny, just tell Johnny to make this one. You can get your money back after 1 month if you're unhappy. So sign up and you can get your money back after 1 month. Literally, there's so much alpha in there. Hyperliquid calls. Just call after call after call. That's where we spend our time. Anyway, so let's go back to this perfect storm that we're talking about, right? And what is this perfect storm? This perfect storm is the war ending, the Clarity Act, Saylor buying like crazy, and then one other thing which made it which I think closed off this perfect storm. And that is the fact that Bitcoin outperformed all other risk assets during the war. And sometimes what you need is just outperformance to drive the price, right? So the better you do, people looked at Bitcoin and said, hasn't performed. But if you take it from the beginning of the war, it's outperformed gold, it's outperformed silver, it's outperformed stocks. It's basically been, I guess, the best performing asset out there. And now, when we look at Bitcoin, we are at a very, very, very key level here, right? So the first thing is we've broken the downtrend that we've been in since October. That's October 10th. That's when the mayhem began. And that's the downtrend that we've been in since October. And what you can see for the first time now, we've broken the downtrend, right? And that makes me cautiously optimistic, right? It makes me cautiously optimistic. I'm not all out bullish yet. I'm not saying the bear market's over. I'm not saying, but it's made me cautiously optimistic. When we get a breakout of a downward trend that has been since this huge event over here, which was the big cascade of liquidations on October 10th, I've got to be a little bit bullish, right? Especially if that's backed up by the on-chain evidence and the fundamentals. And that's exactly what's happening, right? So as Willie Woo says, capital flows into Bitcoin just flipped positive for the first time since January. Liquidity is repairing since the 10th of October, which is when the downtrend actually started. The Coinbase premium is positive, although this could be Michael Saylor, right? This Coinbase premium is an American premium, and it could actually be Michael Saylor. The long-term holder supply is now going up. So long-term holders are actually starting to buy again, which is usually quite a good sign. And as I said, Saylor's buying like an absolute crazy person. So here we are. We've broken the downtrend that's been happening since October. We are at a very, very, very key point. Why? Because the second biggest holders, or the biggest holders of Bitcoin, one of the two, are the ETFs. And now we've reached the ETF cost basis. When the ETF cost, if we continue to go up, so we're going to get some resistance here. The resistance here is going to be people that bought into the ETF at 74,000, which is the average ETF cost basis. And those people actually selling because they're like, oh, but we're back at break even. Let's get the hell out. Once we get through this resistance point, then I think we start tackling the next level over here. I'm back on the 3-minute chart like crazy. So then we start chasing the next levels over here to basically get up to the 77, 78,000 level, right? Now, I want to show you something around that 78,000. Oh, we're above 75,000. This is exactly what I thought would happen. And I think within the next 24 to 48 hours, if Saylor keeps buying, we could get to 76, 77, and then maybe even 78. The RSIs are telling you the same thing. There's still room to run on the RSIs, right? We still have some room to run the RSIs. Then we get to 78.80. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because at 78.80, not only do we get to the top of the wedge here, not only do we get to the top of the flag here, but we also get to the bull market support band. And this is exactly my thesis, right? My thesis says the following. Right now, if you look at the bear market, and if you basically look at all other bear markets, it's basically a series of these bear flags. So you go down, you retrace up, you go down, you retrace up, you go up slowly, you try and get some momentum, you don't get some momentum, and then you invalidate and eventually land up going back down. So that's kind of where we are at the moment, right? If we get to 78,000 and we don't reject, in other words, we get here and somehow we find the momentum to actually push through. Now, I think that's, to be honest, a little bit unlikely, but let's just look at that scenario for 1 second. If we break through that, then I think we start getting into a bullish pattern again. And then we maybe invalidate the whole 4-year cycle and we maybe actually start running. That's one case. The second case is that we get to 78,000, and I'm almost sure this rally takes us to 76, 77, 78. Once we get to 76, 77, 78, then what happens then? And what worries me is that we basically get this big rejection and we start moving back down to 68, 68, 69, etc., etc. We've got to be open to both scenarios. I read this from CGT Trader. I mean, he's got a point here. He says shorts are getting liquidated left and right. Since yesterday, aggressive spot buying triggered another short squeeze, wiping out 200 million in positive positions. That's why we ran where we ran. And that aggressive spot buying was obviously Saylor, right? Since then, funding has flipped positive, meaning leverage traders have turned long again. However, spot demand that fueled this move has already declined. At the same time, these new longs have not been able to push the price higher. The longer this rally continues, the more the liquidity builds below. Once the bull trap is over, we dump and we get a brutal dump. It is something that we should keep in mind. Although right now, up until about 78,000, I maintain a little bit more of a bullish thing. If we get through 78,000, then I actually move my analysis to the Fibonacci's, and basically the next fib level is at 99,000. So we want to break this fib level, which I think we will. I think we have already, but we need to close above it. And then we want to go slightly higher. And if we go slightly higher, then we could get to the 99,000. So we'll keep watching that. You know, we're not here to forecast. I mean, we can have a thesis. My thesis is right now 77, 78 next up. That's where my thesis basically ends, right? Yeah, so let's talk about altcoins for a little bit, because I don't think we haven't spent a lot of time actually talking about the altcoins. You can see on the altcoins, a pretty green day. I think the big winner here, and especially if you go back like to the month, and let's just go back here to the month and to the year, etc., etc. I think the big winner here is actually Hyperliquid, right? So if you look at Hyperliquid, I want to spend some time actually talking about this. They're trading at $45. The catalyst that sent this thing to $45, even though it's been probably the best performing token of the bear market, is the fact that the SEC came out with that regulation yesterday. And effectively that means that in the US, Hyperliquid doesn't need a broker-dealer license, which means that like to be a centralized exchange, you need to get a broker-dealer license, you need a perpetuals license. But Hyperliquid doesn't need that to actually trade in the United States, believe it or not. And so it's giving a real use case for DeFi. And I think right now the biggest custodian of this is actually Hyperliquid. I think if you think about Hyperliquid and Solana, and I think there's a good chart to actually look at here. And I don't know if I've got, here we go. Here's the HypeSol chart, which is up 160% year to date. I think what this chart is telling you is Solana have this vision of becoming the decentralized NASDAQ, whereas Hyperliquid they want to become to house all of finance on one chain. And effectively now you've got these competing narratives of like house all of finance on one chain and become the NASDAQ, the decentralized NASDAQ. And now if you look at it, these two are actually fighting in market share. So if you go to CoinGecko and just look at like the rankings on CoinGecko, it's like you got like Solana with a market cap of 50 million. But then if you look at Hyperliquid, I'm looking on a fully diluted, and that's where this gets a bit tricky, right? So on a fully diluted, Solana's got a 53 billion FDV. If you look at Hyperliquid, on a fully diluted, and I know people say, but you can't use fully, I only use fully diluted because the rest is all shenanigans, $43 billion. So now you kind of say, look, Hype's actually coming to eat Solana's lunch. And right now, we were talking about it earlier on the Front Runners research call, and we're kind of saying like, Hyperliquid is everything that FTX was supposed to be and wasn't. And Jeff from Hyperliquid is everything that SBF was supposed to be but actually wasn't. The more you learn about Jeff, the more amazing he actually becomes. And the more you learned about SBF, the more you hated him and basically want to smash him. So I think that's one thing to look at. The other thing that I think is worth looking at is the ETH BTC chart. Look at this chart. This kind of tells you, if you look at ETH's gone up for the last 14 days. And I think it was Ryan Adams who basically said, did he say that? Or am I dreaming again? Hold on a second. I think ETH up 14% in the last 7 days, which is up is good. And what you see here is if you look at the ETH BTC chart, this chart here is coming up to like a big resistance. Again, I think what's going to happen here is if we break the resistance and we break the $78,000 level, then we start getting into another run, which I think will be a very, very, very interesting run. So yeah, that's the update for today. Remember a few things. Number one, if you want to sign up for Front Runners, we'll give you, if you want, 1 month free. In other words, test it for a month. You're not happy, we'll give you your money back. Second of all, if you want to sign up for a trading competition. Now, again, this trading competition it's on 𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is a non-KYC exchange. You can sign up. What we're doing is we're trying to prove that we can beat any market, right? And so there's $120,000 up for grabs. But more than that, it's going to be all of us trading together, trying to make money. It starts on when does it start? It starts on the 17th. Okay, it starts on the 17th. Ooh, it says you can't register after Thursday. Okay, so you got to register like very soon. There's a link below. Sign up with a link below. Join the competition. You can put $100 in the account. You can trade with $100. It's just more to learn, to trade. Can I sign for backrunners? This guy's funny, yeah? Those who want it from the backside. Keep the video on YouTube. Keep the video on YouTube. Just do your best. Hold your mouth so we can keep the video on YouTube. Just hold your mouth so you can keep the video on YouTube, hardest. All right, chaps, that's it for today. I'll see you guys again tomorrow. I'm launching a video on the other channel, Crypto Insider, between today and tomorrow. Not sure when I'll have time to film it and edit it, but it's about the end of the war because, right now the dumb money is thinking about the war and the smart money is thinking about what happens after the war. And I think we need to start thinking about what happens after the war because this war is pretty much over. All right, see you guys again tomorrow. Until then, trade well, my friends.